Hi, we're going to talk about Silk's Aquatint today. Silk Aquatint is a process of achieving illusion that looks like an aquatint, but instead of using a metal plate, we're going to be using a matte board with silk glued down to it. Today we're using silk screen silk, our mesh, so it's not truly silk, a matte board plate, some cardboard chips, and PVA. Here I'm going to spread the glue around and do my best to glue the silk screen mesh down to my matte board plate. Taking extra care to scrape it smooth and try and get the bubbles out. This is going to take a little bit of while. So silk aquatint is actually part of the Collagraph family, but it wipes like an intaglio plate and it tends to look much more painterly than a lot of other Collagraph techniques. So the concept here is that once the silk is fully glued down and sealed, that's really important, that when it's wiped with intaglio ink, it will essentially hold ink like a black aquatint. So you can kind of think of this in sort of the mezzotint approach, right? So you have a dark black tone, and we're going to build up material on top of that to block out the silk and gradually lighten our impression. This is going to take a few layers, so just bear with me. Still have to get all these bubbles out, and then I have to let this dry. So now some of you might be using a plexiglass plate. The plexiglass plate might be a little easier in some ways because it's not absorbent, and so doesn't need to be sealed the same way a cardboard plate needs to be. The only downside with a plexiglass plate is you can't stain it. And so what we're going to do here is once we get it fully glued down and all the bubbles squeezed out, we're going to trim the silk and we're going to stain it black. So here we go, and just kind of getting that last bit of bubble out here. Yeah. So next up, I want to trim the excess silk that is dangling off of the edge of the plate. You can use the edge, you can just flip it over and use the edge of the plate to run your knife along. Now, some people, just be careful. When I did this, I ended up peeling away a little bit of the silk that had been glued down, and then it was like a total pain to try and glue it back down again. So be careful when you're cutting and trimming it. Next up, then I want to do is I want to stain my plate black. What this will do is it will give me a better sense of how I'm building up my highlights on top of that plate. So here I'm just using a little bit of acrylic paint, watered down, and then I'm just going to brush that onto the plate to give it a nice black stain. This took a while. I needed to I needed to paint it on and then let it dry, and then I had to do another layer to get a fully black stain on this plate. And then also check to make sure things are glued down. So I'm starting to get a much more sturdy plate that is a little bit more watertight. Now that's something that's really important because once you go, maybe doesn't feel very important right now, but we haven't started rubbing ink into the plate yet. So as soon as you start to apply ink into your plate, it'll just drink up that ink. So you want to make sure that you have enough sealing material on your silk aquatint if you're using a cardboard plate so that it doesn't absorb all of that ink and get soggy. You can print with a plate that hasn't sealed very well, but it's a lot harder to wipe. And that'll just save you a little bit of grief. So now once this is dry, we can go ahead and talk about painting into it. So I have my plate is ready to go, looking good. And I'm going to be painting on top of it this image that I took from Maui, one of the beautiful volcanoes in Maui on this mountain trail. And I chose this because it has a lot of variation of tone, but it's also not super complicated to get the idea. Landscapes are kind of great like that. Now, ideally you'd be using white paint here, white or white gel medium mixed with some paint, or gel medium mixed with some white paint. but I didn't have the gel medium, so I'm mixing my own homemade stuff. We'll see how it goes. But the concept is still the same. So here I didn't have anything white, so I'm just using yellow. Forgive me. But the idea is that you want to use white here so that you can have a better visual as you build up those layers of what it's going to look like when it prints, right? So if you're building up with a transparent layer of white, it's actually going to print as a light tonal gray. And then as you build up more layers of white, it'll be more and more of the mesh being fully blocked, and it will print lighter and lighter. You can also, as a finishing touch, go back into this and apply fully smooth surfaces to the plate if you want bright white areas. And you can also add in like textures with glue for bright white lines that lay on top of the silk aquatint. So that's that. Here I am just layering that up. I've watered down this yellow quite a bit, but it's a little bit more opaque than I wanted. So it's pretty thin, but it's showing actually more. I think it's not blocking as much as it looks like it's blocking on this. So I'm going to have to build up several layers here and let them dry in between. So stay tuned for my next edition in this series where we build up some more layers and then we see about printing it. When we go to print this plate, we don't actually have a printing press in my home. So we're going to do some trial tests on hand printing. I have a suspicion that this will actually print by hand better than a traditional intaglio plate, mainly because it just holds so much ink that some of it's bound to transfer. So that's my sort of take on that, and hopefully this will work out. But that's the general concept of a silk aquatint, and yeah. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you've never done silk aquatint before, it's a really sort of straightforward process that can achieve some really sophisticated looks with a limited number of tools. So I think it's a really great printmaking process to try at home when you're stuck at home and you don't have any equipment or tools except for maybe some paint supplies and a table to work on. So thank you so much, and I'll just finish this up here. Please let me know if you find any tricks that are different than this. Be happy to add those as comments on this video. So thank you so much.